Hello, and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly look at all matters property with our property expert, Joe Joshi. Don't forget, as we're live every Sunday morning, please post your thoughts or questions in the comments below. We'd love to hear what are thinking about what we're saying, any questions you have for Joe, either on YouTube or on our Facebook pages. So, Joe, good morning, welcome, and happy Diwali.
Yes, good morning, Paul, and a happy Diwali to all that have been celebrating over the last few days. It's a very auspicious day. It was nice to see the Chancellor actually put the divas outside number 11, and equally, of course, the Prime Minister lighting the Jyot, light over darkness, as it is said. So, yes, a fantastic time for all Hindus, Sikhs and Jains throughout the world.
Yeah, historic moment.
Yes, I mean, today is theoretically the Hindu calendar's New Year, so it's the equivalent of the natural calendar's New Year, but it rained throughout our fireworks yesterday, but that didn't dampen the sparkle that was out in the skies under the current COVID situation. So yeah, where there's a will, there's always a way, and we find it.
Yes, not the best day for a celebration like Diwali yesterday, for sure. And indeed, today doesn't look much better. Let's take a look at the property news this week. Some brightness, I think, maybe in the stories that we have for you this week. Pleased to see. Our first story, the typical average home price in the UK, Joe, has risen now to in excess of 250,000 for the first time, according to the Halifax Building Society. Prices have risen 7.5% in this last 12 months to October. So that's got to be good news for investors, Joe.
Paul, do you know, it's amazing to think it's actually just now that the average price has got to £250,000. My view on that has always been that, and I continue to sort of reiterate that time and time again, that it is the best investment, not only as a home you buy, but as an investment period. And it just goes to show, when growing up, £250,000 and £1 million sounded and seemed like a lot of money. And when you think today that the average person, not only is the average house price, but the average person who has maybe 3 or 4 or 5 buy-to-let properties is actually deemed to be a millionaire in terms of value of property. So quite frightening. And over the years, people have always said to me, "Oh, house prices will drop," and I'm waiting for that moment when I can just jump in and buy and be ahead of the game. It's quite a sort of sobering to think that that's where now the average house price is. So an average person today would be £250,000 in buying a £250,000 property, which is quite amazing where we are in terms of, and what else I say adds such value and such importance other than your investment in property or your home.
Well, this is what some of the people are saying, of course, is that the property market has become detached from economic reality. Where else can you see growth of 7.5%? Building society returns, other investment schemes, nowhere near that kind of level. Has property really got itself out of kilter?
Not at all. And that's partly because property has always been the vehicle, the tool that every successive government seems to have used continuously. They've not found anything else that is safer than houses, in all honesty, for people to feel, touch, and be comfortable with. You look at the investments and all the things that over the years people have tried, from growing up with so-called endowment policies that were giving us promises of what they were going to be, and people realized that much earlier in their life and decided to cash in and decided that they weren't going to pay. Life assurance is another dead duck, as far as it's only there when people say, okay, well, now I need to think about it. But there hasn't really been another successful tool that governments have managed to do. And it's a property is, and we are victims of our own doing here. And when you go back a few years ago, you will see that pensioners at a certain age were able to take their pension out and go and buy. Well, what were they going to go and buy? They went and bought property. They didn't buy another pension, did they? They were always happy to get it out of someone else's hand. So I think, I really feel that it's been the tool, it's the hammer that's always been used to try and do. So how can you blame anybody or anything? And of course, there's nothing else that they can continue to add to and take away from. In England, in the United Kingdom, we gauge our wealth by the value of our home. This is one of my own little phrases, by the way. And that is because that's how it is. When things are going good, prices are doing well, everybody thinks they're doing well. And if things are slowing down, they think they gauge their whole circumstances by the value of the home that they live in or the investment that they make.
So first-time buyers are the lifeblood of the property industry. Without them coming in at the bottom of the ladder, getting their first foot on the ladder, it's not going to be very much of a market. So if the price is rising at 7.5%, no one is going to be able to keep up with that kind of investment level, as we've just explained. So is there a danger that the whole thing could implode?
Yes, I mean, it's not so much the danger, Paul. First of all, it is very important. And I think the first-time buyers have been pushed out of the opportunity of buying their first home fundamentally by the flaw that every successive government has not found a tool to be able to get other people, other investors into other things. So subsequently, the first-time buyer suffers. So let me give you an example of my meaning on that. Let's say that I think going back 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years ago, people had pensions, and the chancellor at the time said you can take your pension out and at a certain age and go and invest it. And as I said earlier on, what they did is they took their pension out and thought, hang on a minute, the whole world is buying buy-to-let. So what I'll do is I'll go and buy a flat or a house or an investment somewhere and rent it out. And that way I'm not getting my 0.000 whatever percent interest in my bank. I'm not scared of the pension that some company might absolutely go and spend somewhere else. I want to be in control of my destination, so I'll go and buy a little flat and then put a tenant in it. Well, every time they bought something, it meant that the first-time buyer had a challenger. They had a challenger in an investor who had cash in their pocket, who bought a property and decided that they then wanted to rent out to those first-time buyers. That is a flaw. That's a flaw, as far as I'm concerned, that all successive governments have had. And they need to give motivation and some other tools to the people, especially the elders who have actually made savings, who have got good successive jobs and want to actually, who wants a headache? How many people would want a headache at the age of 55, 65 to go out and collect rent and do those? If they came up with a scheme that actually gave them a good return on their investment, I have some, pretty good ideas what they can do with that. Then yes, they I think would take away those investors, those sort of would-be landlords who actually probably, Paul, don't really want to be landlords, to be perfectly honest with you. When you're at a certain time in life, the last thing you want to be doing is going out having to worry about a leaky tap or whatever. You just want to enjoy your time. But what do? So you actually, as an investor, are taking out the opportunity for the first-time buyers. And that's why the first-time buyer is suffering. The deposits have got to be higher, the prices are much higher, and lending becomes much, much more challenging, much tougher for them.
What would you suggest those people would do? You mentioned you had some ideas.
Well, I think if you look around the world, and one of the things that, my parents had always done back at home, and the governments in places like India have done phenomenal, and a lot of people there use that. And that is that for long-term investment, people would actually get a much, much higher rate, which obviously the government uses, and it was in government savings and so forth. So I remember, growing up, my mother would say, okay, well, I've been to India now, and the money that I've got there, I've now locked into a next 3 to 5 year savings, and I'm going to get maybe 8 or 10% return on my money. Well, that's a lot of money. She never moved it because she only thought about going there, and the chances of her actually going back maybe in the next 3 to 5 years always less. But when she did go back, she knew that she had enough money out of the interest to be able to go and enjoy her journey, her time in India, and still have the bulk sum. That meant that she didn't think about doing other things. And I think a similar policy, similar concept should be, given to people at the age of 55, 65, and say, look, here is a government bond. The government could do with the money. The people have the money sitting in their accounts, and they give them a guaranteed fixed rate return. It's not really rocket science, Paul, to be honest with you. It's quite simple. But I think that most people at that life would say, okay, well, at the moment the government's offering, or the banks are offering, I don't know, 0.1%, maybe 2% of return on their investment. But if you were a seasoned investor and you got a guaranteed over the next 3 to 5 years, maybe even 10 years, return of say 10% or 8% on your money, and it's locked in, and you can just live off the interest, why would you want to go invest in things? You can actually go and enjoy your cruise on the Mediterranean, knowing that there is money that is actually doing, and not have to go and worry about a leaky tap. That then gives the chances to the first time buyers, the kids of the next generation, to have a chance to say, you know what, that's what we've got to do. And watch this space. Now I've told you all of this, the chances are you'll probably find somebody, Rishi will probably watch this afternoon and say, you know what, Joe Joshi should have been Chancellor. But, what can I say?
Well, of course, he's been in the news this week as well, Joe, for a new report that he's commissioned that suggests that they should review CGT, capital gains tax, and make that a little bit more punitive, which kind of seems to be counterproductive. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, again, where do they get the money from? It's back to hammering in the same old place again, isn't it? Let's go, and now all these investors have bought all this. The Chancellor in successive governments allow pensioners to take their money out. They went and bought properties. So now what they want to do is they want to tax the people that made profits out of those, because they couldn't make enough money in the first place. So we're back to square one. We just hammer the property market. They just haven't found another tool, another way to deviate some of the money that they would, and subsequently they could earn more tax, I suppose, from those scenarios. But the CGT has to go in line with the investment, because where are they going to get all this vast amount of money that they've been having to spend under the pandemic to support the country, to support the businesses, to support people? It's going to come from somewhere. We all know that it's somewhere along the line, but it's the generations further down the road that are ultimately going to pay the price. And so whilst it's a thing today, it is got to be something that people got to think about long term, especially with kids. And obviously, we both have families, and pretty much everybody does. And, those guys are the ones that are probably going to have to ultimately pick up the tab.
The government seems pretty keen on letting the property market drive the economy through this pandemic. Obviously, with the stamp duty holiday, etc., and we've got record low interest rates being provided for first-time buyers and the property market in general. Do you think there's been too much stimulus into the market? I mean, we've now seen that as a result of all of that, prices have grown by 7.5% in a year. Is it time to put the brakes on, do you think?
I don't think you can ever put the brakes on, Paul. And how do you do that? It's an impossible challenge as far as I'm concerned. People are much more comfortable, always have been. You might have something that's sitting there lying, doing nothing, but at least you know that it's yours. You can touch it, feel it, and see it. You could turn the key in the front door and go, I'm standing inside, and say it's mine, even though the building society or the bank may own a larger percentage of it and you have it, but you still feel secure because it's in your control. And so no matter which way they want to skin this cat, it is not going to be an easy ride in order to find the right solution. As far as I'm concerned, I think people are the market will continue to stimulate in the current economic climate, especially with the pandemic. You know, we've got to build our way out, and that's what the Prime Minister wants. He wants to build, 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 and build, because it's creating jobs, it's creating the scenario in terms of more people having to have the work. And you know, if you go around, pretty much every road at the moment has been dug up or has a diversion going on. Even though they might be standing there with a hand on the shovel, but the point is that it is a build society at the moment, and so I think that will never really change. I can't see that changing. Having said all of that, I mean, you know, the news is fast traveling that obviously there's more and more homelessness, and more young people are now out on the streets because they can't afford the rents and buy it can't afford the rents. And recent statistics are sort of coming out that the list of people waiting for council properties is just, you know, it's gone off the Richter scale in the first time, because people are not sure what the future is. So I feel that whilst being in property for the 40 years and endorse it, love it, and enjoyed it, and as you can see, I'm paying passion about the subject that I work in, my view is that, you know, there hasn't been anything else that has given people the comfort and the safety. So I can't see that changing, Paul.
Let's move on to asking prices, Joe. An interesting subject in its own right. But the report in this last week in the property industry news suggesting that sales are back to pre-COVID levels, 53% higher in October than last year, and slightly down from the peak of 62% in August of this year. And Rightmove reporting a 5.5 increase in asking prices by mid-October, which is the highest in 4 years. So it looks like sellers are optimistic, Joe.
Yes, of course. Those are regional points as well, Paul. And as I said, you know, when you look at the London prices, you will see that perhaps they haven't shifted as much, primarily because the foreign investor buyer that normally comes into London has been reduced during the pandemic time. Not everybody that lives in the UK who wants to reverse their role and move out of the country into the big city under the current pandemic scenario, because of all the current life situation. So what happens is they are all moving towards outer areas, perhaps even slightly one circle outside central London, maybe West London and Surrey and Berkshires and Buckinghamshire, and those sort of, and throughout the country, to be honest with you, there people are traveling now because life has been made. So yes, it has given them time to think about and restructure their life, and where the opportunity has risen, people have begun to move out. But again, it's the case of when they're sitting at home thinking, well, what do I do? How do I do this? And some people are moving out because they think, well, actually, I can cash in now and actually go and buy something in the other part of the UK, which I can then go and say to myself, I've saved the money. I don't need to go into work every day because I don't need to travel into my office anymore. I can do most things remotely. So it's a change of lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle thing which is driving the market.
If somebody's looking to put a property on the market in the near future, obviously they should come and talk to you. That's the first thing. But secondly, if you are advising them on asking price, what would be your tips for setting an asking price?
I think obviously asking prices back in the days, probably before Uncle Google came onto the market, and people could actually start to see this, that, and the other, and actually do their own comparison. It was the case of what was a supply and demand in an area, and those things would be directed by the quality of the property, the location they lived in, of course, location. And schooling had a huge part to play for their children. They wanted to know where the right education was, right schools were for them. and what the areas that they lived in, for example, how much green there was, and communication. And those are still drivers. But what are drivers equally is the history now, and the history is available on all sorts of research data systems that are available, and people can be realistic in terms of what is the guide price or the asking price that usually they should have for their property. The good thing is that the curve has always gone towards the upper end. It may go up, then stagger for maybe a few years for some reason, and then sort of go up again. But the reverse gear has not particularly been used much, and only in what I call a correction. So when the market it's a supply and demand thing. When the demand has been good and the supply is limited, of course, prices will shoot up. But when the demand isn't that high, they'll find a level of what may have been a realistic value. So, all sorts of connotations are considered prior to giving a guide. But as of course you said earlier on, we're always happy to call out and do a valuation, which is free of charge.
Well, that's quite a bit already today about the property sales market. Let's just talk rentals for a moment, Joe. Average rent now stands at £974 per month, which is an increase of 2.2% in October. However, in London, and you were mentioning regional things a moment ago, regional rents in London down 3.7% for the fifth month in a row. It's decreased, now £1,603 per month. So demand in the capital is falling, and we've kind of covered this on previous programmes, and we've talked about the fact that people are moving out of town. There's plenty of stock available, and that's having a depressing effect on rents. So is it time for landlords to tough it out, do you think, Joe?
I think that, London is an amazing city. It is one of the most, powerful bases in the entire world, and it will have a comeback. It always has, and it always will do. We rely heavily on, obviously, local, but also foreign investment and foreigners that come in. The United Kingdom is still by far the most safest place for any family, any business, anyone to trade. And that will always be an attraction. There is a system here. Nothing's above the law, as they say. And that is a huge attraction, irrespective of the fact that people will always try and, bend or go around the law. But the fact is that those things are the power bases, the strengths of the United Kingdom. And London will always have an attraction. It may be that is the case now. But one of my views would be to hold your nerve. It's only a matter of time. Those will change. And those that are seasoned landlords in London will already know that, Paul.
Mm. Talking about the buy-to-let market in particular, is this a good time to be in it? I mean, if you think about it, Joe, stamp duty holiday means there's more first-time buyers keen to get on the ladder. We've got levels of buy-to-let taxation which are higher than they've ever been. The availability of good financing is not as good as it once was. And of course, with the pandemic, you've got tenants struggling to pay rents or even looking for rental holidays. So it doesn't sound like it's a good time to get into buy-to-let, Joe.
I tend to disagree with you there, Paul. I think I'll go back and say that irrespective of what the current climate will be, security and surety are very, very important for people. And the security is that what else would somebody do? Yes, you might have to pay your dues in terms of taxation, but it's still something better than nothing. And because there is nothing else elsewhere, there is always going to be a level of interest that is going to continue in the rental, buy-to-let, investment type of properties. So I don't think that you're going to shoo them away that quickly. But I think people should consider other methods, and that is going to be challenging in the current climate. So I cannot see why the buy-to-let market would actually wane, irrespective of how tough the lenders may be in terms of wanting to lend. But there are incentives for people now not to be renting, perhaps doing buy-to-let in individuals. there are more incentives perhaps to be doing it as a corporate and as a company. So there's always going to be another way.
And presumably, you want to, if you're letting property through a managing agent, for example, then you're going to be squeezed even further, aren't you?
Yes, you are. I mean, you are going to be squeezed, but sadly, that particular business has been absolutely had the guts ripped out of it, because online operations, companies that have set up, have provided facilities for landlords. Landlords themselves have chosen to continue to manage their own properties, and so they only tend to go to an agent now, almost as a last resort, because they think, oh well, I can't rent it out myself, I better go and pay an agent, and then they want to pay an agent silly money in order to do it. And that's because the internet has come along and made it available, like everything else, that on the high street, and businesses have to find different ways to make income, because the internet has helped to sort of decimate the letting market when you are paying silly money. So I don't think the landlords are actually suffering a great deal. In fact, they're actually much better off. They've got more pounds in the pocket.
Now, one of the things, Joe, that we haven't really talked about on Property Matters since we've been on the air is commercial property. And I know that's something that's very close to your heart, particularly in such a challenging time at the moment. The high street is not a good place. Everyone's putting a brave face on it, putting their Christmas decorations up in the high street for this next 6 weeks or so. But it's a tough time.
Yeah, I think because the general public, Paul, and the general, let's say the 90% of the people are interested in residential because it's their home. It's something where they go and sort of put their feet up and watch the telly and so forth. So that tends to, I don't know, take main focus in terms of what they want to do with it. And I've always said, and I will continue to say, that the residential property market is the hub of everyone's life, because as long as people are buying property, they're going to be using lots of other trades, from kitchens, bathrooms, curtains, carpets, and so forth, that will do that. However, there is the other side of that coin, and that is the commercial side. The commercial side is an area that I think sometimes we don't realize, especially in the last 10 years, and more so in this last particular year, with the pandemic. It has really become more and more apparent as to what commercial landlords, businesses, and people that are actually making a living of what we used to call the high street. And I say used to call the high street because the high street has been, again, decimated over the years by online. If you're not online now, you're not in business, to be perfectly honest with you. If you look back, I remember a particular operation, which was one of the big 4 or 5 food markets. I think they were not online a couple of Christmases ago, and it was very, very clear how much business they lost, and within a heartbeat, they had to sort of get into bed with an online delivery operation, and then set up their own and so forth. And it's, look what's happened. You can pretty much buy anything and everything online now, and the only things you can't do is probably go and get your hair cut. And as ladies, they want their sort of beautician stuff and those sort of things that are things you just can't get online. But pretty much everything else does. Now, in my mind, every retailer, every shop person needs to step outside their shop. It's a pet hate of mine, and they need to step outside and turn around and look at their store. And as I've said this on many numerous occasions, that we buy with our eyes. We want to look at the things, and if we like the look of something, we will step indoors. And so many shops, so many retailers, so many businesses forget what they look like from the front, because they open the door, unlock the key, go inside, and kind of forget to think that the customer is actually looking at them from the outside with fresh eyes, wondering and deciding whether they should bother to even go inside that store, let alone go and shop in there. And this is the time for all businesses, all retailers, especially small independent people that live, off the business that they do, is to step outside, almost make it a mantra today. I recommend you, so you can say it from me personally, I recommend you go outside your shop, turn around and look at it and see whether you think you'd like to go and shop in your own shop. And I think you'll be shocked at how much rubbish there is on the high street, how many people actually don't bother to take a look at their shop. When you look at rental values, Paul, the rental values that they pay are based on 3 or 4 pieces, and I'll share that with you now. There is Zone A rent, Zone B, and Zone C. And I have asked many times when I've been asked to consider doing rental valuations for commercial properties, what is Zone A? Well, why do I pay the highest rent for the first 10 feet of my store? The reason why you pay the highest rent for the first 10 feet for your store is because it's on the high street, and it is the first bit that is everyone's going to see. I can tell you quite clearly and honestly, the first 10 feet normally are the first rubbish feet, because the window is full of stickers. The window is covered, it's never been washed. The outside sign upstairs on the front has probably had no lights working in it for ages. People don't even know whether you're on or open for business. That is the most expensive part of the rent that somebody would pay. And I applaud, I really do want to, encourage shop owners, retailers, any business to step outside and look at your business and say, you know what, would I shop in here? And the answer is, you probably wouldn't.
So it's that thing that you've often said about curb appeal.
Absolutely. We're all consumers, aren't we? You're a consumer, I'm a consumer. Everyone, how do we buy things? What makes you go into a store? Why do people like the bigger stores spend money on their presentation on the outside? If you go into London, and okay, maybe retailers this particular Christmas are suffering, but we go into London and we see the bigger stores, your Harrods, your Selfridges, your Harvey Nicks. They make a fantastic fuss about their window. Why? They make it because they want people to go into their store. We admire that. Consumers admire that. They look at Burberry's and they look at, the Lamborghini car showroom, and they look at the Ferrari car showroom, and they look at those things and they go, wow, I really want to go and buy one of those things. We forget as consumers that there are other consumers, as shop owners, there are consumers that want to, and we want them to be coming to our stores, and we want to attract them. And I think, we just get so caught up in the headache of business, which I understand. We're all in business, I fully understand. And it's very hard to, but because it's my job and because it's something I see all the time, I kind of get a bit, on my pedestal about the fact that, why can't you just get soap and water and wash your window down and clean the bit outside your shop and be seen to be. I remember a very, very learned gentleman, and he was a very, he was like a father figure to us and to the community in our area. And without a shadow of a doubt, those that know and will be listening will know who I'm talking about. Without a shadow of a doubt, in all the years that he ever ran a business, he never ever took off his overall and his brush in his hand. And even as a multimillionaire, he still used to sweep the street outside his door and talk to the customers. And everybody was wondering why. Because as far as he was concerned, that was his best way to make sure that customers still continue to come to his store, because he was seen to be caring, not only caring about his business, but caring about the community. He took that opportunity to speak to people and so forth. And independent business, I'm not saying you've all got to go stand out there with your brush and so forth, but the point I'm trying to say is take care of your business, take care of your investment, take care of your customers. Because if you don't take care of your customers are not going to take care of you. So yeah, commercially, I think that people have got to take a view, and the high street has been decimated, and it is now, almost on its knees, because businesses have gone online. And look at the effort. Look at the effort. If you're on Facebook or you're on Instagram or you're on LinkedIn or wherever you're doing, the minute you've actually ordered something, you're bombarded. Your emails are bombarded with mail shots about, what you can buy and what deals are happening and who's doing such and such. The high street doesn't do that. So in order to be part of what is current, the first step is to step outside, turn around and look at your shop, look at your business and ask yourself, would I go there?
Yeah.
And that would probably be my biggest mantra for today.
It's certainly never been easier to market your business online. The tools are so much more sophisticated. You think back to newspapers and when we would place an advert and then hope that somebody saw it and come into the shop or into our business, and you really had no idea whether that was working or not. What was it somebody said? 50% of marketing works and 50% of it doesn't. The trick is knowing which is the bit that works, and that's always a challenge. But I wanted to come back onto commercial landlords, because there's been a lot of stories in the press about businesses renegotiating their rents, and to some extent there seems to have been an open door, relatively speaking, from the landlords. But the truth of the matter is, when you see some of the rents that the high street is charging, that they have been coining it in for years, and maybe this is just a resetting of the calibration.
Yes, and the news out today, I think, was that one of the big coffee shops has decided that they want not to pay the landlords for the next 3 years their rent on the shops that are not, or the coffee shops that are not performing at the levels that they want. The pandemic has made this real now. People have had to sort of take stock and think. So it's the question of, it's a business question now, whether the landlord says to themselves, I can live with this without for the next 3 years because I've had, relatively good income for the last God knows how many years. Or I say, okay, leave. And, if they leave, then nothing of nothing is nothing. They end up having to pay the rates. So it is a balancing thing, because a vacant shop will need rates being paid. The council are not going to say to the landlord, oh, well, that's okay, you don't have to pay rates because you haven't got a tenant. As far as they're concerned, they want their flesh, their pound of flesh, and everybody wants to try and get the best that they can from each circumstances. But yes, you're absolutely right. Over the years, commercial rents have been extraordinarily high. They've always been on a scale situation, and people say, okay, well, the market is good, so I need more money. If he's making more money, I should get more money, and so forth. But right now, that is not the case. So they're going to have to sort of come to some sort of agreement as to where and how that's going to be developed. But I see that coming more and more. I mean, again, because online has done that to the commercial, I still do believe and do feel, Paul, that there is market, there is room for the man. We all want to touch and feel. I know, having spoken to my good lady at home, often she would say that she still prefers to go into a store and want to sort of lift up that, dress or material or whatever they want to touch it, feel it, maybe go and wear it, see if it works, instead of having to sort of, buy it, not like it, send it back, then like it. It doesn't have the same sort of instant feel of feeling right, feeling happy, feeling that this is the thing I want to buy. So I still think there's a huge market for people on the high street. It's just that those guys have got to recalibrate their situation and look at their stores and say, how do I make that change? We're all having to do that. As you said, looking back at our businesses, we'd probably stick an advert in the property news and spend many pages. I remember we would probably take anything between 6 and 8 pages a week, and that was a lot of money, but it was on a hope. on the hope that our pages were more attractive than our competitors' pages. And
Yes.
if
In
our
fact, the property
competitors,
section was often a separate publication in itself, wasn't it?
well, it was. To be honest with you, it was the sprat to catch the mackerel. I mean, the property pages were the ones that actually made the rest of the paper actually of interest, because nobody really picked up the paper to read only bad news. They wanted to pick up the paper to see what was going on in their neighborhood. And often, going back many years, people would look at it and go, oh, I know that person. Oh, that was in my street. Today, online portals, you just type in the postcode and away where, who, and what. And so that has changed. We had to change it. The property market had to change it. Property market is still the driving force of the economy, but it had to change. And I think in commercial sense, I would still say that, marketing shops got to change.
One last question, because time's against us as always. I don't know where the time goes on a Sunday morning, but one last question for you, Joe, on this situation. It does sound like there will be some commercial property for sale at probably some very competitive prices if people decide to move on to do different things. Commercial landlords may well look to sell. Is this a good time to buy commercial property, do you think, Joe, in general?
I think, look, property is always going to be a good investment, and there'll always be a new tenant, a new idea. We live in the world of innovation. And, people will sit there and say, okay, today this doesn't work, maybe tomorrow this will work. So there'll always be opportunities for people to say, it's done for me. An investment in commercial investment, it might be that people are coming to the end of their time and a new generation will come along and say, we can do it in a different way. There's never, ever a wrong time, as far as I'm concerned, to buy, whether it is to buy for residential to live in, residential to let, residential to invest land, commercial to invest, commercial to develop. The government has allowed different laws under permitted development rights for allowing people to do something. So it's an ever-changing industry, but an industry that will always provide stability, comfort, and most people will never stop investing, whether it's commercial or residential or anything property, which is why we are here as Property Matters, because property does matter in every possible way. And if there's anyone out there that's looking to have a valuation done or looking to sell in the near future, then obviously we're here to do that. We provide that service through our auction business at Town and Country. And of course, our commercial business is dealt with our Fairview International.
Well, Joe, thank you for your thoughts as always. Always most welcome on a Sunday morning. Thank you for that. Don't forget, to everyone viewing the show, we'd love to have your feedback, both on the show in general, but on the topics that we're talking about. And you can leave comments in the comment section below, or indeed you can email us at any time, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. So, Joe, time has beaten us once again. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you to everyone for watching. And we will see you again, of course, next Sunday at 10 o'clock.